we'll then turn it over to Melissa, who will go through the substance of the webinar. Excuse me. We are working on an action transmittal, which hopefully it will go out next week. Wish it had gone out a little sooner, but be that as it may, the action transmittal is to remind you all that the final data for the household report for FY16 will be due on or by December 16th, 2016. Want to also let you know that we're going to keep using the online OLDC system to submit the form, just as you recently did with the estate plans. It is now part of a larger system called Grant Solutions, so that's why you might see that also when you log in. As a reminder, excuse me, we have two forms, the long form and the short form. The 50 states and the District of Columbia will be filling out the long form. The direct grant Indian tribes and tribal organizations will fill out the short forms. Puerto Rico and the territories will fill out the long form. And let's see, we talked about OLDC. Want to thank you very much for your patience in working with us. Every system has its bugs. I think the one I heard most recently about is the fact when you send in your household report, which is part of the requirement of submitting your state plan, if you need to revise it, you need to contact our liaisons to release the report so you can fix it and then send it back in. I think for now that's the best we can do, but if you're having persistent problems, please let us know. And thank you very much for your cooperation. This is a lot. We've asked you to do a number of things, not just the household report, but we'll be talking soon enough about the performance data form. I believe the data quality has improved and the completeness of the data has improved, both pluses for the program and reports to Congress, which we just recently submitted FY11 through FY14, and we're working to get FY15 done in the next several months. So with that, I'll turn it over to Melissa, and thank you.
Thank you, Leon. So just in way of introduction, there's a big team of great people who are at the ready to assist everyone. Before I go on, actually, let me step back. Just so folks know, this session is being recorded, so you'll be able to listen to it again if you'd like, but also just be aware that it's being recorded. So on the line, I believe, are the TNTA staff from Apprise, and these are folks that you've either heard from before or you may hear from in the future. They're great people to reach out to when you need assistance, and they will also help me today if I fumble. Hopefully they will jump in and correct me if I mischaracterize or say anything that isn't correct. These include Dan, Sonia, Jorge, and Michelle. They're all great people, and I encourage you to reach out to them if you need them. So today we're going to talk about a few different things, and we know that there are people on the line who have done the household report for many years, and we also know that there are folks on the line who may be seeing it for the first time. And so we're going to go over some of the basics in the first section, and that includes what's different. So for those of you who have done this many years, there will be information in the section that's useful to you in terms of what you need to be paying attention to this year that's different from past years. In the second section, we'll talk about completing the form in OLDC. So we'll just very briefly review some of the key steps to getting into OLDC and making sure your form is submitted correctly. We'll also talk about data checks, and some of you have heard this in the regional training and even in last year's training. There are a lot of validation checks in OLDC that look for errors and help you self-identify errors, and so we're going to talk about what some of those are and how you need to address them. And then we'll also talk about common issues. These are things that we see year after year, or things that we're seeing even just this year in terms of things we need to contact grantees about to fix their data. So we're going to be preemptive and hopefully talk about that so that you can get it addressed before you submit it. So we're going to start in the topic area 1, which, as I mentioned, is we're going to talk about what's different in the 2016 form. And we'll go over a few key pieces before we do that, but when we talk about what's different, these are the things that we should be paying attention to today. That's the nominal benefit reporting update. We'll talk about last year and the guidance that was given last year and how that looks for this year. We'll also talk about bill payment assistance reporting. This is the first year that grantees are required to complete a field regarding unduplicated count of bill payment assisted households, and so we'll be talking about what that means. So I think I just mentioned this again, so we'll just skip this, but these are the things that are new that we'll want people to pay attention to. So to just kind of give a review, this is section 2 of the household report, and it is required that grantees identify the poverty level of households receiving all kinds of assistance. And so you'll notice here there are 5 categories, and the percent of poverty distributions are required for heating, cooling, year-round crisis, winter crisis, summer crisis, other types of crisis, emergency furnace repair and replacement, and weatherization. So for all of those components, you'll be required to identify households and which poverty range they fell under. You are not required to provide these percent of poverty distributions for the unduplicated count of any type of LIHEAP. So those households who are getting any kind of LIHEAP, when you provide that unduplicated count, you're not required to break that out by poverty level. You're also not required for the new any type of bill payment assistance count to break those out by poverty level, nor are you required to provide poverty or income information for households receiving nominal benefits. Just like the income distributions, you're required to also break out the number of assisted households by vulnerable population. So these are your elderly, 60 years or older, disabled, or young child households who are age 5 and under. There's also a column for households with any one of those. So you're required to break those out for all of the same that you did in the previous slide, except this one you also have to break out any type of LIHEAP benefit by vulnerable population. So that big unduplicated count, you are going to need to also provide vulnerable population information for that. You're still not required to provide vulnerable population counts for the any type of bill payment assistance or nominal benefits lines. So we'll be talking about both of those next. So many of you recall last year at this time we were talking about nominal benefits, and there was a change in the definition. And we had reported that OCS was requiring grantees to count all households with a LIHEAP benefit of less than $51 as a nominal benefit. However, you'll remember that at the spring, I think of this last year, OCS came out and updated that definition and said, you know what, we're going to go back to the old way of kind of looking at nominal benefits, and we're going to only count those households or SNAP households assisted with a nominal LIHEAP benefit. So these are what are known as heat and NEAT programs in many states. And this updated definition is going to stay the same for this year. So nominal payments in this year's household report are defined as all SNAP households that received a nominal LIHEAP benefit during 2016. You're required to report these households in the nominal payments line, and there is a separate line item Once again, we're talking about the Cool and Eat and Heat and Eat programs here. It does not need to be an unduplicated count. In addition to providing the number, anyone who has a or is reporting nominal benefit households also has to include a note in their notes section to outline the amount of the benefit provided per household and a description of the program operated by the state. So do you want to go to the next slide just to kind of illustrate what this looks like? We're using New York as an example here, and you'll see that line 7, it's highlighted in red. This is the line where you would report nominal payments, and in this case one household received a nominal payment. And in the notes section, New York has said, and this is not real, but obviously, but New York has said we issued a $21 nominal heat and eat benefit to one household in 2016. So this is an example of the kind of note that we would expect to see if any households are reported in line 7. This year, this was on the form last year, but it wasn't required. This year it is. There is a bill payment assistance households line. And this is looking at any households who are provided with a LIHEAP benefit used to pay a share of their energy bill or utility deposits. And we're calling it cash because a lot of folks can associate with that. They understand what that means. But it's important just to say this is the money that would be given to a household or utility to offset energy costs in their energy bill. And so, like I said, last year this was optional, but it is required now. And it should include households receiving heating, cooling, and crisis benefits. This would also include, in some states, supplemental benefits. And it also includes people who get money for heat and rent. So basically, anytime you're paying to help someone's energy bill should be counted in this count. What it doesn't include are weatherization services, energy-related equipment repair or replacement, and it should not include nominal payment households either. So this is a new thing. It's an unduplicated count. I think that's important. And this is the information that's going to actually carry forward into your performance data form. So, you know, some of you have taken a look at that already, and you know that this is the first line on the section 2 of the performance data form. And so this is the information you provide here will be taken over and transferred right into that document. So I'm going to go to the next slide. Here are some things that may help you as you're filling out the form. We know that households often get more than one kind of bill payment assistance through the year. So if Fitzwilliam Darcy walks into my office, I may give him a crisis benefit or a heating benefit in October, and he may come back for a crisis benefit in January. I'm going to count him in each line, the crisis line and the heating assistance line, but when I get down to the bill payment assistance line, I'm only going to count him once. And so we expect that the count of bill payment assisted households should always be less than the sum of the counts above it. So, you know, if I was summing Fitzwilliam Darcy's benefits, it would be 2, but really he's one household in the bill payment assistance line. We also know that some grantees provide weatherization or equipment repair and replacement, and that people don't need to get heating assistance or crisis assistance in order to receive these benefits. So we expect that any type of LIHEAP household count to actually be higher than the bill payment assisted households. And I know it's tough for, at least it's tough for me to imagine this without seeing it or doing it. So this is one of those slides to highlight or put a star on as you're doing your household report. It'll be helpful to come back to this to see if what you're seeing on your form lines up with this. one of the things I always appreciate about a prize is that they consider the process as well as what you're putting in your report. And the things like bill payment reporting are going to require your IT folks or you or whoever in your office puts together reports or pulls information out of your system. It's going to require them to do a little bit of additional or different kind of work. And so these are some considerations for them. We expect that the things you've been doing, for past years is going to work for your winter and summer and equipment repair and weatherization and any type of LIHEAP benefits reporting, because none of that has changed. But because the bill payment assistance field is new, there will need to be some work done, and there'll need to be a new query or program used to develop an unduplicated count of households receiving bill payment assistance. And so we've put here what that includes and doesn't include. I would actually just add, and we may add before we send it out, that this also includes heat included in rent households. But this is something you could hand to your IT person or use as you're talking to them to describe what it is that you need. And then the nominal payment reporting, most people did this last year, but it may require another discussion. This is the total, not unduplicated number of SNAP households assisted with a nominal LIHEAP benefit. So we know, for example, I'm going to take a step back, we know that in some states there may be programs that are one-off from the HEDA need, and so a person could technically receive 2 nominal benefits through 2 different programs. In this case, they would be counted twice. So that's what that not unduplicated means. Okay. So just to kind of summarize, so you can pull your questions together. We talked about what's different this year in the form. The nominal benefit reporting update happened in the spring last year and is carrying through to this year. So we're only reporting on people who are in nominal payment programs like SNAP Heat Need or SNAP Cool Need. And the mandatory LIHEAP bill payment assistance reporting is obviously no longer voluntary. So we did notice that some people turned in household reports marked as final that didn't have this line, so we want to make sure that people know it is required this year. All of these reporting guidelines and instructions are written down and are very useful, and the link is right here in the slides that you can go access for that. So we're going to pause for questions, I believe, are next. And so we have this cool graphic you'll all remember if you've been online with us before, but for those of you who haven't, there's a few different ways to ask questions. For those of you who don't like to speak or want to speak, you can enter a text question in the, can you move your cursor over that, Michelle?
Yep.
Great. You'll notice there if you want to type a question for staff, that'll come through to Michelle, who can speak it out to everyone. If you're on the call and you have your audio pin enabled, you can click the raise your hand button on your screen. That will allow you to get in a queue to ask your question. And then the other thing I think that's important is the audio pin issue. If you've called in but you haven't entered an audio pin and you want to speak, you need to press pound, exactly what it says on the screen there, pound 85 or whatever your audio pin is, pound audio pin pound. And it'll feel a little weird to do it while you're on the call, but it does work and we'll be able to hear you. So I'm going to hand it over to Michelle for questions.
Right now, it doesn't look like we have any questions. Nope. Okay, we have one from Janet Ward. I unmuted you, Janet. Janet, are you there? Okay, well, I'm going to unmute you. I'm going to mute you again, and then if your question isn't answered, feel free to either type in or raise your hand again. And we have another question from Bobby Arnell. Bobby, I'm going to unmute you.
Oh, perfect. Great. You can you hear me?
Yep.
So I'm a new LIHEAP field director for the state of Vermont, so this will be the first time that I fill out this report form. You mentioned that those households that receive a cash payment whose to pay their heating bill that's part of their rent now has to be inputted on the bill payment assistance line. What about Vermont gives cash payments to folks who heat with wood as their primary fuel source? Do I need to report on those wood households in that same line as well?
Hi there, Bobby. So this includes anyone who receives energy assistance in the form of money. I'm trying to think of how many different ways to say this, because I know that people pay the utility, they pay households directly, some people pay landlords for heat and rent. This is any household who received money to pay their energy bill, with the exception of nominal benefit households.
Okay.
So those wood households that you paid cash to would be included in this count.
Great. I have one more question if I can jump in real quick.
Yeah.
On the report form that we were talking about, I think it's section 1, line 1 just says heating, right? And then line 3 is crisis. So is heating just the regular benefit that we give out? Because we could have somebody get a heating benefit and then later on down, 3 months later get a crisis benefit as well.
Right.
So would we be counting that household in each of those lines?
Yes. So this is a great example. If a household came in, for heating, you would count them once in the heating line, and then if they came in later for crisis, you would count them in the crisis, whichever crisis it is that you're giving them. And then you would only count them once in line 5, any type of LIHEAP assistance.
Okay, and the same goes for, we just started doing weatherization with LIHEAP as well, so if that same household received weatherization services, they could be counted once in the heating, once in the crisis, and once in the weatherization, but only once in line item 5 under any type of LIHEAP assistance. Is that correct? Is that correct as well?
Yes.
Okay.
That's perfect.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
Thanks.
It looks like that was our last question.
Okay, great. We have, just so that you all know.
Actually,
okay, go ahead.
Sorry, there's one more. It's a type-in question from Haley Lasky, and the question is, there are not 2016 household report instructions on the federal website, only update for the 2015 household report.
Hi, Hallie. So we'll have a prize look into that to see if that's accurate, and we'll make sure that we either get an updated. Go ahead.
This is Leon. I mentioned we're working on an action transmittal. That would include the instructions. So yeah, they're not on there yet. Hopefully they'll be up there next week. Stay tuned, but don't follow the ones that give you instructions for FY15 at this point.
Okay, so when the action transmittal comes out, that's when you should go look for instructions. If we get instructions posted sooner, David, maybe we can send out an email.
Great, and we just have the similar question again, which you just answered, Melissa, so I think now we're okay to move on.
Okay. We do have 3, we'll be stopping for questions, so if you think of something, don't hesitate to ask in a later topic area. So topic 2, we're going to talk a little bit about OLDC, or Grant Solutions. I'm going to be referring to it as OLDC because Grant Solutions is kind of your gateway. So if there's any confusion, let me know, but I'm going to refer to it as OLDC throughout the rest of these slides. We're going to talk just very, very, very briefly about access. Many of you have been in webinars before where we've gone over this, and we have some in the past. We'll even give you a link. But we do want to review for those of you who are new, and also just a refresher for some of you who have done this before. So We'll be talking about access and the submission and review procedures. Next slide. So as I mentioned, there are previous webinars that go into a lot of detail. So for those of you who are new, I would really encourage you to go in and take a look at these to get a better idea of some of the things that you can and should do in OLDC when you enter your data. There are some basics on the next slide. This is the login. Once you're logged in, you'll want to go click OLDC in the top taskbar. Here's also the help desk, and as Leon mentioned, you can also, we'd encourage you if you're having technical issues to contact the help desk, but if there are things that aren't being resolved or you have questions that are beyond the help desks, you know, they're substantial questions talking about content, you'll want to call your liaison, or you can call us at a prize. I will say, because I don't think we're covering it here, I always tell the bathtub story during this webinar, and I would feel bad if I didn't tell it again. So the night before one of the very first one of these webinars we gave, I went to run a bath, and I thought I need to run out to the printer and grab something to read, and I then sat at my computer and processed a few spreadsheets worth of data before remembering that I had the bathtub running, and I flooded the bathroom. And the reason I'm telling you this story is that we sit in our cubicles or our offices, and we are working on our OLDC forms as we're you know, getting ready for this report, and we'll enter a field, and then we'll go to check something to enter another field, and we'll forget that it's sitting there, and then our coworker distracts us. And what happens is that OLDC will close out, and it won't auto-save. So save your work often as you're doing your reporting. The other piece that I would recommend is if any of your procrastinators, make sure you get on and log on. They change passwords every so often, and if you're trying to go in at 11 p.m. when the report's due at midnight, you will not be able to get help to get a new password. So I would really encourage you all to, even if you're not ready to fill out the report, to go online, make sure your password is updated, that you have access to the form you need, that you have your questions answered, so that when you do go in at 11 o'clock the night before it's due, which I'm not encouraging, it will be ready for you to go. So those are my 2 cents. If you want to go to the next, this is the submission schedule, which Leon briefly talked about. Last year it was due on the 31st of December, and so we really want to draw attention to the fact that it's due the 16th of December this year. The preliminary household report form was due in August, so with your state plan. So some of you turned in estimated figures, and some of you turned in final, but the final is due for everyone on the 16th of December, and then we have next year's reporting dates as well, or anticipated reporting dates listed. So this is a handy graphic, and I think we've mentioned this before. It's a great thing to put on your wall for all your reporting needs, because this works beyond the household report with all of your other OLDC forms as well. But you'll notice that the form goes backward or forward and backwards. So when you need to submit it, you're going to constantly save, like we talked about. You're going to validate, which you can do at any time during the process. You don't have to wait till the end. You can go ahead and validate your form, and that'll run checks, show you some potential errors. You have to certify it, so this applies the electronic signature, and then you have to submit it. And then we'll talk later about moving backwards through that process as well when you need to update or revise. So just a few technical slides for those of you who are new. When you go into OLDC, you're going to select your form first, and the one you're going to select for most of the people on this webinar, you're going to select the long form. And so this is an example screenshot you should be looking at. We've picked on Louisiana here, but you're going to go through and find it. And this is what I was talking about, making sure that your form is in there and good to go before you wait to the last minute to fill it out is really important. When you do get in there and you get your report, this is what you're going to see, a number of dates. You'll be able to see your past household report as well as your future. You can look into your future here. And then you're going to select the one that you want to revise. In this case, it's going to be the third down. You're going to, once you click the report you want, you're going to go down to that second arrow where we have the second arrow in step 5, and you're going to select New Edit Revise Report. And then you're going to click Enter. And when you get there, this is what you're going to see. This means that you've initialized the form. It's there, it's ready for you to go and available for editing. And so this is when you're going to fill it out, save, validate, certify, and submit it. And we go back to I think this slide again, where you can see, oh, nope, you can see running through the different steps. And so these are all the things you're going to do, and keep in mind you may be in the save and validate sections for a while. You can come back multiple times and fill out different fields, and many of you need to because you are maybe collecting weatherization data from or waiting on your weatherization data from another agency, or IT's got you information on poverty levels but not on vulnerable households. And so it is something you may need to revisit, and that's completely acceptable. So if we can go back forward, this cool slide here is really the summary of the data submission process. This is another one of those slides that's really useful to understand all the steps you need to be taking in order to get your data submitted. And so this is helpful to pass out to your staff or to have next to your computer as you're working on this report. So what happens when you click the button? When you've submitted your 2016 household report, the team I was talking about at Apprise is going to be conducting a review of your report. Now, hopefully, we'll go through at the end of this presentation the validations that are run on the report that'll let you kind of self-check and fix the form in as many places as possible. But occasionally, Apprise will find errors in spite of those validations. And so they'll conduct a thorough review, then they'll get in touch with you. So Apprise will reach out directly to you to ask you either questions to clarify what you've entered on the form or to revise it, and they'll help you with whatever you need. Once the items requiring revision have been confirmed with your office, we'll encourage you to make the revisions and resubmit the report. And here's this handy slide again. And so the reason we include this is that the process to unsubmit a report is just backward steps. So when you go in to revise a report, you're going to have to unsubmit, uncertify. And so the next slides go through that just a little bit. These are some of the steps. You click the report just like you would have when you were initializing it. You're going to go down and you're going to select View Print Status Approve Report, and then you're going to click Enter. And there's a note here, please contact your OCS liaison if your 2016 report is not available for editing. And this is really important to do that right away so that they can get to the bottom of it and make it available for you to edit. This is what's going to appear when you click Print Approve. The report form status will come up, so you'll notice here that it's been submitted with warnings, and you have the option of unsubmitting your report. Then you'll want to edit the original and then click Uncertify, and it's now available for editing. Once again, this is for people like me who can't remember, are not going to remember this at all. This is a really valuable slide to hang on to, because even if you are a perfect overachiever, you may have revisions that need to be made. And so these kinds of slides are really valuable for helping you just do that very quickly. Once again, this is a summary of the data revision and resubmission process. It walks you through actually finding the form, the status to select, and then the things you need to click in order to edit and resubmit your report. This slide again. So we talked a little bit about OLDC. Some of you are just going to need to get in and do it and see it in order to kind of learn more about it, but hopefully this has given you a good idea of the steps involved so that you take some time to do it and explore in advance so that when it comes time to doing the reporting, it's seamless. Once again, we're encouraging people to contact your OCS liaison if things aren't available, you're not seeing your report, you can't edit it. Anytime you need to contact them. If you reach out to a prize can also help, but we'll do so in collaboration with your liaison. So are there questions about this piece or the last one?
Yes, so there's a question going back to the first topic first that was typed in. So the question is, Maryland states expedites the crises assistance as expedited assistance. We do not do any second payment. How will this affect the bill assistant households?
So the bill payment assisted households are an unduplicated count. So regardless of whether they get one or multiple payments, every household's only going to be counted once.
Okay.
Does that answer the question?
Yes, I think so. It was a typed in question, so I believe so. And then we have another question. Should we ever submit a household report revision, i.e. revision 1, rather than unsubmit, edit, / resubmit? Historically, we have been told to submit report revisions for some reports rather than editing the original report.
I don't have a good answer for that right now. David?
Yeah. No, you should. The only time you should submit a revision is after we have finalized your liaison. So you'll submit your report. We will check your report. We'll ask you to make updates. We may ask you to make updates. You'll finalize your report. Once we, but then the second thing you should realize is that we will not declare your household report final until you have also completed your performance data form grantee survey, because we make sure those two forms are consistent. But at some point once you've heard from us that we have accepted both your household report and your grantee survey, we will declare that to be final. And that should happen sometime around March 1st. After that time, if you find something new that you need to revise, you will submit a revision number 1. But between your first submission and the whole series of updates, we want you to be working in that initial submission.
Okay, and we also have a question about the due dates and whether the preliminary household report is due on September 1st or August 31st.
It's due, Leon, correct me if I'm wrong, it's due with the state plan. We have August 31st listed.
I believe it's September 1st.
Okay.
I could be wrong, but that's my understanding.
Okay. So we can update that in these slides. I also think we can perhaps add a slide that addresses or clarifies the revision versus updates. I think that's really useful information.
But the answer is generally continue to submit revisions until continue to unsubmit and resubmit until we tell you that you should be submitting a revision.
Right.
Okay,
that was a great question.
And we also have another question going back to the bill payment assistance. So will I be correct in saying the bill payment excludes any nominal LIHEAP program payments, parentheses, not nominal amounts less than $50, and if the household received only other equipment?
So there are 3 answers. If the household received only other equipment, it would not be counted in the bill payment assisted households. If the household received a nominal benefit defined as a SNAP heat and heat or a SNAP cool and heat benefit, it would not be counted in the bill payment assisted households. But we've gotten rid of the definition of $51 and under. So that's no longer relevant. What's relevant is did they receive a benefit under one of those nominal payment programs. But I think you're on the right track in terms of not counting nominal households, not that the household is nominal, not counting nominal payment households and not counting other equipment households in bill payment assisted numbers is absolutely correct.
Melissa, one example is that I believe it's Ohio that has a cooling grant that part of which can be used to pay for equipment. And so maybe a household would get $25 in cash and $125 towards equipment. If they got the $25 in cash, they're a bill payment assistance household. If all they got was, their entire grant was used up in buying a piece of equipment, they're not a bill payment assistance household.
That's a great example.
Okay, and we also have run requests to go back to the slide about former webinars and information, and I'll just respond to that these slides will be made available, so you definitely will have that information available to you. And then we do have one call-in question from Janet, so I'm going to unmute you, Janet, and you should be unmuted. Are you there, Janet? Okay, well, if it's not working, Janet, feel free to type your question into the questions box and we'll be sure to answer it. All right, Melissa, I think we can move on.
Poor Janet.
Melissa, maybe you want to cover the idea of people should make sure that they call in and they should enter their audio PIN.
Yeah, so in your, you'll notice in this picture on the screen, if you could mouse over it, Michelle.
Sure.
There's a pink bar, and this should be showing up in your on your screen, and it says if you're already on the call, press #85 now. Now 85 may not be the number that's showing in yours, so you need to use your number. But that, if you do that, that'll allow you to speak on the call. If you don't do that, we can't hear you. So Janet, if you want to try that while we go on, and then hopefully we get to hear your voice before the end of the session. But as Michelle mentioned, you can also type in your question. So we're going to go on to topic 3. These are the data checks. And this is a really awesome thing because no one wants to have to deal continuously with report errors after they've already submitted a report. And what these validation checks in OLDC do is allow you to, I would call self-check the form, really go in and look at where there are potential errors and make corrections before you submit it. And so we're going to talk about some of those so that you can be kind of watching out for them. So the first kind of checks we do are outlier checks and year-to-year consistency checks. And so this compares your data from this year that you're submitting to last year to look for things that may seem a little bit off. So some examples are on the next slides that we'll go over. So the first are outlier checks. If in 2016 you report something that is, you report a number of households in a certain category, say crisis or heating, that's 10 times the reported number of households that you put on your report for last year, it's going to be a flag. It's going to say, did you mean to? Because that's a lot more than what you said you did last year. And so that's one of the outliers. And then it does the opposite, in the opposite direction. So if you served 50,000 households in with crisis in 2015, and now all of a sudden we're seeing that you only served 100 households, it's going to say, whoa, did you mean add another 0. You know, so it's looking for things that are significantly different from the previous year to make sure, to just kind of clue you in that maybe you made a typo or maybe this is correct, but we want to draw your attention to it. And so there's an example of this on the next slide. Here you'll notice that in 2015, this particular grantee had 1,500 households served with summer crisis, but in 2016 they're only reporting 145. And so it's just going to draw your attention to that and say, you know, you'll see the message here, it says double check your entry. It's not, in this case, it's not going to keep you from submitting the report, but it is going to make sure, ask you to double check and make sure that you've put the right thing in. We're also going to check year-to-year consistency. So not just about outliers, but we're going to look at whether you have different program elements. So for example, if you reported in 2016 that you served 10,000 people with furnace repair and replacement, but you didn't do any of that in 2015, once again, we're going to draw your attention to that and say, you know, are you sure this is right? You didn't do this last year. We want to make sure that this is indeed something new you're doing this year. And then vice versa. So you know, if last year you served 15,000 people with furnace repair and replacement and this year you have not served any, we're going to point that out as well and say, gosh, you know, you did this last year, are you sure you didn't do it this year? So there's an example of this on the next screen. In this case, it is the, I have highlighted in my notes, it's the cooling program. So in 2015, this particular grantee reported that they served 900 cooling households, and then this year they're not reporting any. And so the note tells you that if this component has not been discontinued, make sure you update this, but it will let you go on because there's a good possibility that this year you just didn't do a cooling program. We also check form to form now, and I think that this is one we talked about at the regional trainings, the importance of continuity between all forms. You know, it used to be that different departments would submit different forms and no one really paid attention, or people did pay attention, but not as much attention to the data between reports. So if you said you were going to do something, is that reflected in the report? And you're going to see that here in some of the examples. In this case, model plan data. So if you can go to the next slide, you'll see that if a grantee reports providing assistance in its model plan, if someone says we are going to have a cooling program, but then when we get to their house report and there's no households reported there, it's going to issue a warning. So there's an example of this on the next slide. You'll notice that in this particular case, the grantee said in their model plan there on the left that they were going to have a cooling assistance program from March to November, but then when we look at their household report, they haven't reported any households. And so you'll notice that the warning is really clear about this. It says if you said you were going to do this, we need to see the numbers. And it says if you decided not to, which happens, you run out of money, or there are a number of reasons, but if you decide, we just didn't do a cooling assistance, we thought we were, we didn't, you have to go in and submit a plan amendment before you can get your household report submitted. So that's another important reason to take a look at this before, a little bit before it's due, so that you can make sure you're updating other forms that might need to be updated. Clicking on the validate button is going to run all these validations. And so I say this all the time, even if your form isn't complete, you can run the validation checks. You're going to get, of course, some errors for the incomplete fields, but it will let you check the data as you're walking through. It'll let you check the ones that you have entered. So you can do this at any time. There are two kinds of warnings you can get in the system. And actually, one is a fatal error. And as the name suggests, it says this is a serious problem, and because it's so fatal, we cannot let you submit your household report until you fix it. The warning message, once again, is one of those things that say, hey, you know, this might be a data entry error. You should double check it before you submit it. So they're two different. The warning is going to let you keep going. The fatal error is going to stop. It's going to stop you where you're at. You're not going to be able to submit it until you fix it. So the next slides kind of talk about this. All warnings or errors give you a pop-up box. It'll let you go to the error, and it'll also give you a long description link for more detailed information about the issue. And so, you know, if you need more information about why an error is popping up, you're going to click the long description. If you just want to go to the error and fix it or take a look at it, you can click Go to Error. And so here's an example of someone who can't do math, which is really many of us. So if the number of households that received any type of LIHEAP assistance exceeds the sum of households that received each type of assistance, the following error message will appear. So if you just look here, you know, this person has reported 22,000 heating, 1,000 year-round crisis, 145 summer, and 500 in weatherization, which does not equal 40,000. And so what we're saying is it needs to be either equal or less than the amounts above. And so this is a clear arithmetic, you know, error that it's not going to let you go on until you fix this. So this is an example of a fatal error. In the other example, this is a warning. This says, you know, you've said that 22,000 people received heating, but you've also, you know, you've put that same number in any type of LIHEAP assistance. In some states, this is going to be the case because states require a person get a heating benefit before they get any other kind of benefit. And so for some states this is going to be the case, but for many it's not. And so what this will do is it'll just trigger a warning to say double check this, make sure it's right. And it also cues you to fill in a note in the notes section, which is what I think we're going to talk about next. I've said this for the last 2 years, and I'll repeat it again. Notes are your friends in this report. There will be many warnings you get throughout the, or there could be many warnings that you get that are completely unwarranted isn't the right word, but they're invalid because it's just how you run your program. And so always, when you get a warning, I would just recommend that you address it in the notes section. The previous example that we just showed you, the note would say every household requires a heating assistance benefit before receiving other benefits, which is why any type of households is the same as heating assistance. Another note might say, we offered a cooling program component last year, but are not offering one this year. And so this is why we say year-to-year alterations in reporting may lead to confusion. A warning is going to pop up, but if we don't see a note in there to say, yeah, we noticed the warning, but yes, this data is correct and here's why, a prize may call you to follow up on that. So if you don't want to hear from a prize and you want to just be done with the report, use the notes section liberally. So this is kind of a summary. We talked about the different validation checks. We're going to look at outliers, things that are numbers that may be 10 times above or below the previous year's numbers. We're going to look at consistency. Are there program components you're offering this year that you didn't offer last year or vice versa? And we're also going to look at form-to-form consistency checks. If you said you were going to offer a cooling assistance program in your state plan, we should expect to see cooling assistance households in your household report. And so we're going to be checking all three of those areas. And in the system, there are fatal errors, and the word fatal should give you some indication that it's serious and you cannot move forward with it. And a warning will let you go past it, but you should pay attention to it, and if possible, include a note in the notes section as to why that you have double-checked it and to why your data is the way it is. And we'll go to the question section. Are we going to get Janet this time?
Right now, it does not look like there are any questions, but just to emphasize as well, if you're trying to call in, like Melissa said, make sure you've entered your access code, and additionally, make sure that you yourself are unmuted, just so hopefully we don't run into any more problems with trying to hear questions. But right now, it doesn't look like there are any questions, so I think we can move on.
Great. So we're going to go over some of the most common issues, and we're going to go over these fairly quickly because it's almost time for the webinar to be finished. If you want to just go to the first slide, we'll just go over them one by one. The first is the household report and state plan consistencies. We just mentioned this. It's really important that what you have in your state plan is reflected in your household report. And if for some reason you've changed your mind or have not been able to offer something you said you could in your state plan, you need to go back and amend it. This is an example of an unduplicated count issue. This is probably one of the biggest issues we see all of the time. Mr. Arnell from Vermont, I think, maybe, talked about this beautifully in that you may count a person in multiple lines, but you're only going to count them once in the unduplicated any type of assistance. And we often see people summing numbers or not being able to give an unduplicated count. And we'll tell you about assistance at the end, but this is one area we see a lot of. And we do give an example here of it is very possible for you to have the same number of heating households as you do any type, but we will want to see a note that says why we're seeing that number. This is another unduplicated count issue we see a lot. Just as any type of LIHEAP needs to be unduplicated, so does at least one vulnerable member. So you'll notice here that there's 5,000 of each kind of vulnerable household, but then the person has indicated that there's 20,000 households with at least an elderly, disabled, or young child. This is an obvious error. This would be a fatal error. But oftentimes they're a little bit more subtle than that. And so if you're needing assistance getting an unduplicated count, building a query to get an unduplicated count, anything that if you're just running into issues understanding what it means, we really encourage you to reach out to Apprise and we'll give you some assistance with that. Oftentimes, unduplicated count issues in the weatherization program come from challenges obtaining data and then reconciling data between LIHEAP assistance and weatherization. Is especially true if you're in different offices or even different departments or agencies. And so we encourage you to work closely with your weatherization folks, and I think on the next slide we talk about we've helped many states both merge their data, if you're needing help getting data from other folks and merging it with yours and getting an unduplicated count. And we've also helped just with facilitation and discussion of data exchanges between departments. And so we're happy to help assist with that, facilitate, and get OCS involved as well if you'd like. And then the bill payment assistance reporting, we covered that today, but it is a new required element, and we're happy to help folks understand what that does and doesn't include. So if you have an example like the few that we heard and you just want to double check, make sure that you're understanding it right, you can send any one of the people listed in this slide deck an email, and we will verify for you that you are thinking correctly about it, or we can talk with you if you have a situation where you're not sure where to count households. So this is a summary of the main issues we see, differences between what you say you're going to do and what you report on, unduplicated count, which can be tricky, and we're happy to help. Weatherization data, and then the new bill payment assistance reporting, it is now required. So that's important to keep in mind. We're going to actually, I'm going to have you go to the next slide, and we'll take questions at the end, because what we're going to talk about now are resources. There are a ton of people out there to help you. I can't underscore this enough. You can contact your OCS liaisons, and if they have questions, they can get a hold of us or whoever they need to find out how to help you. If you're having issues accessing OLDC with password login, your computer, it's not showing up on your screen right, there's both an email and a help desk phone number, and then any one of us on the Apprise team are happy to help you or get you in touch with someone who can, and all of our emails and phone numbers are listed here. And so now we'll go ahead and take the last set of questions. It's 1 o'clock, so people can hop off if they need to.
Great. So we have one typed in question, and it reads, in reporting weatherization households, Vermont has chosen the 60% of SMI eligibility option. Having chosen this option, do we still need to break these households into the federal poverty line buckets?
Yes. And if you need assistance doing that, we can help you with that.
Okay, and it's looking like that's the last question.
If you think of questions as you're reading through these, or as you know, I'm sure you're all going to be thinking about this the whole rest of the afternoon, so you're welcome to call us. We do have future webinars planned. On December 20th, we'll be talking about the performance data form, the Section 1 or Part 1 grantee survey, and on Thursday, January 5th, we'll be talking about the performance measure section of the performance data form. So we look forward to having you all along for the ride then. I think that's it. Thank you all for joining us.